Uhuru, Uhuru everyone. Just double checking to make sure we are actually live. Okay, we are. Okay, Uhuru everyone. Welcome to the special teach-in live stream on why JPMorgan Chase Bank owes reparations to African people inside the United States and around the world. This is Jesse Neville, the national chair of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and I am very honored to be presenting to you today on behalf of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, which is the organization of white people formed by working under the leadership of the African People's Socialist Party. And I want to give a salute to our leadership, Chairman Omali Yeshitela, the founder and leader of the Uhuru Movement, who has worked in the trenches to forward the struggle of African people for self-determination and national liberation for decades. Since the 1960s, he has shouldered the responsibility to complete the Black Revolution of the 1960s and to build a worldwide movement of African workers. I also want to salute Chairwoman Penny Hess, who, along with Chairman Omali Yeshitela, spoke last night at an incredible event. If you haven't watched that event, I encourage you to go to our YouTube channel, Uhuru Solidarity's YouTube channel, as well as Uhuru Solidarity's Facebook page. Watch the webinar that was hosted last night to learn from Chairman Omali Yeshitela and the chairwoman of the African People's Solidarity Committee, Penny Hess, about how we can, as white people, be involved in class struggle, genuine class struggle. And I'm getting a phone call right now from Hallie Murray because we are going to be hearing from our comrades on the front lines. And I got Hallie Murray on the phone here. Uhuru Hallie, you are live with me. You are, yes, you're live. Yes, I can send it to you by text. I'll be sending that to you right now. And I sent it to you and Nina by email, but I'll text it to both of you right now.
Yeah, we just had a really mobilizing meeting. We had a bunch of cars here. We had some photographers and video people come and yeah.
Right on.
In a couple minutes. We're just about to roll out.
Okay, they're rolling out. So the reason why we are holding this this event today, this live stream, is because right now, as we speak, comrades from the Uhuru Solidarity Movement are getting ready to haunt JPMorgan Chase with the revolutionary demand for reparations to African people. Our comrades in Boston, Massachusetts, and New York City, New York, are holding car protests to make Wall Street pay reparations, to demand that JPMorgan Chase pay reparations to African people by contributing its stolen resources, by turning over those stolen resources to the Black Power Blueprint project, a visionary economic development institution and initiative led by the African working class fighting to regain political and economic power in their own hands, that is headquartered in St. Louis, Missouri. So what I'm going to do now, as we wait for our comrades to join us, we're going to be getting live from the front lines reports on those actions, which are the kickoff actions of the campaign to make Wall Street pay reparations. I want to share with you all who are watching, and I actually don't know who is watching because I am on Zoom and I can't see Facebook. So I'm going to find out in just a minute because I want to greet you. I want to thank you for being on with me today. And what I want to talk to you about is, why are we targeting JPMorgan Chase for reparations to African people? And who are we? First of all, we are the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. We're the organization created by the African People's Socialist Party, which is an all-African revolutionary party of African workers. We are an organization created by the party to give white people the ability to turn our backs on our own ruling class, to turn our backs on our own US government, and stand in principled solidarity with African people, with indigenous people, with Arab people, with the Mexican people, with the people of Palestine, with the people of Syria, and with all colonized peoples around the world, by joining the African Revolution headquartered inside the belly of the beast. That we have to function as an extension of the African liberation movement into white society, where we sit on the pedestal of the oppression of African people in an economy that was constructed through the invasion of Africa, the enslavement of millions of African people, the genocide, the mass murder committed against the indigenous people of this land, and the theft of their land that permeates every single facet of the United States and European parasitic capitalist economy. We have a responsibility to go into the white community and build a movement for reparations to the Black community, to African people. And right now, what Chairman Omali Yeshitela is calling on the Uhuru Solidarity Movement to do is to go for the jugular, go for the Elon Musks of the world, go for the Jeff Bezoses of the world, go for the Bill Gateses of the world, go for the so-called 1%, the ruling elite, the 3 billionaires who collectively own more wealth than 80% of African people in this country combined, and demand and force them to pay reparations to African people. So in carrying out this campaign, which to be clear, this is not Occupy Wall Street, this is not Bernie Sanders, this is not an attempt to reform capitalism, this is not an attempt to get our student loan debts waived, this is not an attempt to replenish our 401k funds or anything like that. This is a struggle against capitalism, because as Penny Hess and Chairman Omali Yeshitela said last night, the campaign to make Wall Street pay reparations is a campaign to make parasitic capitalism pay African people what it owes them, which is everything, everything. There is not a cent, there is not a bank account in the white world that is not filled with the resources, with the stolen resources and blood-soaked value of labor of African people. So we want to talk to you before we bring on our comrades who are going to be calling in soon. I want to talk to you about why we owe why JPMorgan Chase owes reparations. We also owe reparations as regular white people, but we want to talk about why JPMorgan Chase owes reparations. So I want to thank the people who are tuning in, and I want to thank Jackson. I want to thank Chiwanizo, Uhuru. I want to thank Rashada, Casey Mackey, John Hill, Edwina, and I'm sure there are other people tuning in as well. So we are very glad to have you on with us. Uhuru, thank you for joining us. So let's talk about why. 5 reasons why JPMorgan Chase owes reparations to African people. And you can find this article on our website at uhurusolidarity.org. So JPMorgan Chase, for those who don't know, is actually the largest bank in the United States. And we believe that JPMorgan Chase owes reparations to African people because, like the parasitic capitalist economy that JPMorgan Chase represents, of which it is emblematic, JPMorgan Chase is a criminal enterprise constructed on a foundation of colonial slavery and genocide, period. JPMorgan Chase has an estimated net worth of $2.38 trillion. Their CEO, Jamie Dimon, has a personal net worth of $1.3 billion. So here's 5 reasons why, and there are many more than 5. This is part 1. I'm sure we're going to do a part 2. JPMorgan Chase must pay reparations to African people by turning over its stolen resources to the Black Power Blueprint, a visionary economic development project forwarding the struggle of the African working class for political and economic power. So JPMorgan Chase accepted over 13,000 enslaved Africans as collateral on loans. They themselves owned over 1,000 enslaved African human beings. In 2005, The Guardian newspaper reported that 2 of JPMorgan Chase's predecessor companies had, quote, accepted thousands of, they use the word slaves, I'm going to say enslaved African people, because as Chairman Omali Yeshitela said, white people did not go to Africa and capture slaves. White people went to Africa and captured free African people and enslaved them. So I'm going to use the term enslaved African people where they say slaves. JPMorgan Chase's predecessor companies had accepted thousands of enslaved African people as collateral on loans made to plantation owners in the South in the early 19th century. Citizens Bank and Canal Bank in Louisiana, both now part of JPMorgan, served plantations from the 1830s until the American Civil War, which ended in 1865. The banks sometimes took ownership of slaves when the plantation owners defaulted on loans. The company estimated that between 1831 and 1865, the two banks accepted approximately 13,000 enslaved African people as collateral and owned up to at least 1,250 enslaved African human beings. That is reason number one why comrades are in the streets of Boston right now. And I'm going to actually bring in Hallie demanding reparations from JPMorgan Chase. Here's Hallie Murray.
Hey, Jesse, can you hear me? Oh,
I can hear you, comrade, but I can't see you.
wait, here. All right, how about now?
Hello.
All right, we are live here. We got some cars joined us. I can see in the caravan. Here it is. One of the posters fell off a front vehicle, so that's a contradiction. But this is great. Yeah, I can't really hear anything that you would say, but I mean, look at this. It's a beautiful day. We just passed the JPMorgan Securities and Private Banking just down the street. It's such a massive building. I don't know if you can still see it there. It's so big you can't even see it. I was right under it. I couldn't see it. And now we're heading north on Atlantic Ave in Boston, occupied Wampanoag territory. This is indigenous land, and we have a whole crowd of comrades here with amazing posters on the side. And in a couple minutes, maybe 5 minutes or so, we're gonna be in front of Chase Bank at 48 Salem Street in the North End. Oh wow, we gotta fix that banner. Oh well, it happens. So yeah, how's this teaching going, Jesse? How's it been?
It's going well, comrade. We want to salute you for being out there. And are we going to be able to see when you get to JPMorgan Chase? Are we going to be able to see that and see some of the other comrades that are out there?
Well, there's hold on. There's we're all in the cars. We don't have any bikers out there. Oh, geez. So we have our photographer and our video person will be out there. But
yeah.
You know, we want to respect social distancing, so we didn't encourage people to go protest there in person. But we got quite a car rally. Some people started following us too.
All right. Well, be careful.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna follow the road now, but I'm really glad to call in. I really can't wait to hear how the New York comrades are doing. Has Nina called in yet?
Not yet. They're still getting ready.
All right. Well.
Right.
Yeah, we'll talk. Actually, yeah, we'll talk soon. Tonight at 7, we're gonna do a summation call. So
we can bring you in again if there's a better time. So give us a call. Uhuru.
Okay, Uhuru.
All right. Well, that sounded rather raucous. So Uhuru, salute to those comrades in Boston. And right now there's car actions. They've got banners on the sides of their cars. And, you know, we're expecting to get some pictures as well sent in. So we'll be able to show you that. But, you know, they're out there. They're in front of the JPMorgan Chase Bank. They're going to be going in New York from the JPMorgan headquarters to the actual home of Jamie Dimon, who is the CEO. Okay, so let me see if I can go back here. So it looks like Hallie is still on. I don't know if that's showing up on there. No, it's not. Okay. All right, comrades. So what we're talking about is why JPMorgan Chase owes reparations to African people. And we were talking about how this bank, and this is so typical, by the way, we're not singling them out because they were exceptionally bad. We're singling them out because they represent what was really the norm in the United States when it comes to the creation of this whole parasitic capitalist economy off of the enslavement of African people. That everything about the entire structure of the United States, from the economic activity that underlies all else to even the generation of ideas and culture and music and things like that, is shot through with the legacy of and with the profits of the enslavement of African people. So we're talking about how JPMorgan Chase published documents on the enslaved Africans owned by its predecessor companies. They published these things on their website, but those documents have since been removed. What those documents revealed is that they listed thousands of enslaved Africans as unnamed individuals or by first name. Peggy, Jacob, Big Joe, Lucille, Armistead, Monday, and Celestine were among the names given to the African human beings who were owned by banks that later merged with Chase Manhattan in 1931. The exposure, now why do we know this? The reason why we even know these things, because obviously, the JPMorgan Chase wasn't putting this out of their own accord. They were actually required to disclose this past involvement with the slave trade as a result of a slavery disclosure ordinance adopted by the City Council of Chicago in 2002 that required companies to detail past involvement with the slave trade when they're doing business with the city government. And they were actually named in a class action lawsuit in 2002 that called for reparations from 18 companies whose wealth is rooted in slavery. We're talking about Lloyd's of London, Fleet Boston, R.J. Reynolds Tobacco, Brown and Williamson, CSX Corporation, and Lehman Brothers. So JPMorgan Chase has been under fire for a while now. There was actually a student boycott in the early 2000s. Students were saying that they were going to boycott JPMorgan Chase student loans until the bank paid reparations to African people. Eventually, JPMorgan sent out an apology to their investors, an apology, heavy air quotes on that one, for profiteering from the use of enslaved African people as collateral. The bank, with total assets of $2.7 trillion, then created a little paltry $5 million scholarship fund for African students in Louisiana, which I think we can correctly characterize as a desperate public relations maneuver designed to mute the demand for reparations. That's reason number one. Reason number two, two of Chase Bank's predecessors in New York worked with an insurance company to insure colonial slave masters against the loss of their property, meaning the death of an enslaved African person. During the period of chattel slavery, New York received 40% of US cotton revenue through money earned by its financial firms and insurance companies. There were two banks that were later absorbed by Chase that were described in a document from 1852 that listed them as servicers of insurance policies issued on the lives of enslaved African people. The document was called A Method by Which Slave Owners May Be Protected from Loss, and it was put out by the National Loan Fund Assurance Company of London. And it names two banks that were later absorbed into Chase Manhattan as having been servicers of those insurance policies. The presidents of those banks are listed on the circular as members of the New York Board of Directors. And it also included, by the way, medical examiners in Virginia, North Carolina, and Washington, D.C., who were authorized to examine enslaved Africans and offer details about the insurance policies. For example, a slave, this is a quote, a slave aged 30 years can be insured for $500 for a year for $11.25. If he dies, the owner, although deprived of the revenue of his labor, will still not be unrecompensed for his loss, for there will still remain to him not his slave, but the $500 which constituted his value. And as was discussed in the webinar last night, enslaved African people were the most valuable asset, more valuable than gold and silver in this country. JPMorgan Chase, this is reason number three, JPMorgan Chase financed the colonial private prison industry responsible for the mass incarceration of African people in the United States. And they were a major investor in the private prison industry until maybe a year ago when they did an about face and said, oh, we don't want to do this anymore because there was a huge PR disaster for all of the banks that had been propping up the prison system for so many years. So they pulled their money out of that and said, well, that we basically wash our hands of this. But that doesn't change the fact that in April 2018, at that point, JPMorgan Chase was the largest lender to private prison corporations like GEO Group and CoreCivic. They held $240 million in their debt in June 2017, and JPMorgan underwrote another $159.5 million bond for CoreCivic to finance the construction of a 2,432-bed corrections facility in Kansas. All right, so slavery. They owned enslaved African people. They gave insurance policies to slave owners, and they have financed the ongoing enslavement of African people through the colonial prison system. Number 4, JPMorgan Chase and the US banks launder billions of dollars and provide ships for CIA-backed drug trafficking. JPMorgan Chase, like all of the big banks in this country, has a long history of propping up CIA drug cartels by laundering billions of dollars for them, and now they even provide ships. In July of last year in Philadelphia, the US Customs and Border Protection seized a cargo vessel containing nearly 20 tons of cocaine, totaling an estimated value of about $1.3 billion. That ship was owned by JPMorgan Chase. JPMorgan Chase, along with HSBC, Western Union, Bank of America, Citigroup, and Wachovia, have refused to comply with American anti-money laundering laws. The role of the US banking industry in laundering money for CIA-backed drug traffickers, who we know the history that the CIA was involved in bringing in heroin and bringing in crack cocaine, using them as a form of chemical warfare against the colonized African community in this country. That is another reason why JP Morgan owes reparations to African people. And while not a single JP Morgan representative, not a single CIA official has ever gone to prison for facilitating for basically functioning as the biggest global drug kingpins on the planet, under the banner of a war on drugs, the US colonial capitalist state has flooded African communities with militarized police, criminalized and slandered African people, and locked up Africans by the millions in the colonial prison system. JPMorgan Chase, okay, so that's reason number 4. And finally, you would think that in the era of COVID-19, that when we're seeing all this huge financial crisis, that maybe that would be reflected in JPMorgan Chase. Now, JPMorgan Chase is profiting from the COVID-19 pandemic as the crisis deepens, as the genocidal conditions ravage African and indigenous communities. JPMorgan Chase was among the banks to receive government bailout funds that amounted to the trillions. They made it sound like it was about $454 billion, but once it goes through the Federal Reserve and gets leveraged, that's just startup money that gets leveraged 10 times over by the Federal Reserve. It ended up being trillions of dollars from the CARES Act going to the banks. And although the Federal Reserve has yet to disclose the names of the corporations and banks that have received funds from their most recent $2 trillion slush fund, the Burning Spear newspaper reported that many of the same banks who received over $29 trillion during the Obama era were first in line for COVID-19 cash. So that includes Wells Fargo, that includes Citibank, and that includes JPMorgan Chase. And those 3 banks together have netted $10 billion from fees processing loans from the small business aid allotted by the CARES Act. Majority of that money went to big businesses, and almost none of it went to African businesses. And for their wealthiest clients, according to the New York Times, JPMorgan Chase and Citibank offered concierge treatment to fast track their loan applications. So while most small business owners were sitting around trying to figure out the paperwork, dealing with glitchy websites, and it being stalled every step of the way, and even being able to submit an application for a loan, the wealthiest clients of JPMorgan Chase got a special phone call and were walked through step by step how to submit the paperwork without having to deal with any glitchy online portals. And most small businesses couldn't even get their loan applications submitted before all the cash was gobbled up by big businesses. So these are just 5 among many. I mean, let's not even talk about, I mean, we don't have time today. In the future, we will talk about all of the ways. This is a book called Bankers and Empire, How Wall Street Colonized the Caribbean. This talks about how JPMorgan Chase and JPMorgan itself and Chase Manhattan and Citibank and all these other major banks were completely involved in the colonization of Cuba, of Panama, of Haiti. They were there every step of the way, working with the US government, working with the state to enforce the imperialist domination of those peoples and nations in the Caribbean. So we're going to talk about that in another webinar in the future, but we wanted to stop with those 5 points. I'm not sure if we're able to bring on any more live streams from our comrades on the front lines. I'm just texting to find out. But what I want to do is, how many people are watching? Do we have a sense of that? I want to thank everyone for tuning in, and I want to ask you, 23 people. All right, Uhuru, to all of you 23 comrades who are tuning in, I want to encourage you to join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement if you haven't already. Go to uhurusolidarity.org and click Become a Member and get involved. Get involved in forwarding this struggle, forwarding this campaign. Get on the front lines with us. Join the struggle to demand reparations from these parasitic capitalist, billionaires, these millionaires who really represent the whole system. That's the thing we have to understand, is that when we focus our scope on Wall Street, we are forwarding a strategy to overturn the entire foul, filthy, rotten system of parasitic capitalism that has no redeeming qualities. This is the system that is destroying the planet Earth. This is the system under which the degradation of women, the all kinds of discrimination based on sexuality and gender take place. That is parasitic capitalism, and it rests upon a foundation of the enslavement and colonization of African people. So this system has to go. Capitalism has to go. US imperialism has to go. And white people, it's time for us to jump off the pedestal and join this fight, join this struggle under the leadership of the African Revolution. Because as Chairman Omali Yeshitela said last night, the African People's Socialist Party and Chairman Omali Yeshitela created us, created a vehicle for us to hop in and join the forward side of history and actually do our part. That we have a responsibility in this, we have an assignment, we have a mission. So I don't think we have any more live streams coming in. We're facing some tech difficulties, but keep your eyes on this page throughout the day, because we're going to be getting pictures. We have photographers on the outside, and that's probably safer than somebody driving calling. So we have people on the outside who are going to be taking pictures and videos, and we're going to be bringing in that footage and those pictures and uploading them to the Uhuru Solidarity Movement's Facebook page throughout the day. So keep your eyes on this page and join the campaign to make Wall Street pay reparations. Go to uhurusolidarity.org/Wall Street. Join us and forward this struggle to make Wall Street pay reparations and build a mass movement of unity through reparations to African people. Thank you, comrades. And again, keep your attention focused on this page throughout the day, because there's going to be a ton of more content coming out from the front lines in both New York and Boston. Uhuru.